Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 777A, and today's date is September 28th, 2015, and the title of this episode is More Economic Indicators Are Signaling an Economic Collapse is Headed Our Way. Let's get right into the economic collapse financial news. Now, in the last couple of weeks, we've been seeing this market fluctuate. We're seeing the market being pushed up, and then we're seeing these huge declines. We've been seeing this since August, and it's continuing right now. Today, 300 points down. Now, will the market go back up tomorrow? Will the high-frequency traders, the plunge protection regime, push this as hard as they possibly can? Maybe. But as we see, it's getting harder and harder for them to do. They're not getting those 300, 400, 500 highs they used to get. They're only getting 50, 100 points, maybe a little bit over 100 points. It's getting harder and harder to do. And what we've been noticing is that these economic indicators that are being thrown out all over the place, they're signaling that this entire system, it is headed for a collapse. We're seeing more layoffs than we've ever seen before. Whole Foods is laying off 1,500 people. Carter Fuel Systems, 100 plus. Longmei Group, this is a Chinese coal company, 100,000 people. Synovus Energy, 540 people. In England, 1,700 jobs slashed at Teesside Steel Plant. We're seeing this continually happen. More and more jobs are being removed, and they're not being replaced. Where are all these people going to find work? Think what just happened since the beginning of this year. Dell, Sony, HP, IBM, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, and I'm not even including all the retail stores that have completely closed down, and thousands of those people have been laid off. And we see that personal income right now, it's not going up at all. Actually, it's declining. And they're saying there was a modest personal income rise of about 0.3% month on month in August. This is the weakest growth and biggest miss since March's tumble. The income growth is slowing down dramatically. And what happened now, since income is slowing down, people are being laid off. We're seeing the savings rate has dropped to 10 months low. People are dipping into their savings to make ends meet. And this explains why, at this point, there are so many people below the poverty line. About 9.4 million Americans are below the poverty line. Think about this. In a nation that the government, the Fed, and everyone else is telling us it's so great, we have 9.4 million Americans below poverty. Something's wrong here. Things right now are getting worse than the pre-crisis levels for millions of the poorest Americans. Now, the wealthiest 10% of Americans have finally seen their household incomes rise above the levels last seen in 2007. It's also true that the median incomes have recovered from the worst of the 2008 disaster. Median earners were negative 8.1% worse off in 2011, and now they're only negative 6.5% worse off according to most recent data for 2014. Now, of course, as we've seen in 2015, this number is not going to hold up. It's actually going to be much, much worse. However, when we look at the lowest 10% of income earners, the situation is much more precarious. In 2011, the bottom 10% of households were negative 9% worse off in terms of income than they were pre-crisis. Since then, it hasn't gotten any better. Now, it's negative 11.6%. What's the difference between 2007, 2008, and today? Well, there's one huge difference. The Fed's balance sheet has exploded to 3.5 trillion of pretend money, pretend currency. And when we look at all of this, we see that, yes, the wealthier, the higher earners, making more right now. The middle, the lower class, not so much. But this is all going to come to an end. Just like it did in 2008. I remember there was a certain area in New York where I used to live, and it was very wealthy, well-to-do. I didn't live there. And when 2008 hit, the entire place cleared out. Most of the people there lost their wealth. A lot of foreclosures, a lot of short sales, and that area never recovered. The population of the school district kept on shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. Today, it is tiny. And we're going to see this happen once again. We know that the Richmond, New York, Philly, Chicago, and Kansas City Fed, all flashing red signals at us. Well, Dallas right now, they contracted for the 9th month in a row. Things don't look good. The Fed printed at negative 9.5. And we're seeing a disaster in wages. Employees contracting drastically and average work week collapsing. So we're hearing from all the Feds around the country. All of them are contracting. Nothing looks good at this point. And as time goes on, it's just getting worse. I mean, all these indicators are flashing red signals saying, yeah, a collapse is coming. Now, in the housing market, they threw at us that new home construction surged. Now, of course, lumber demand is going down, but construction is going up. And when we look at stores like home improvement stores, furniture stores, they're seeing negative sales. So there's a disconnect here. And then when we look at pending home sales, the National Association of Realtors reported that August pending home sales dropped by negative 1.4% on expectations of a positive 0.4%. Well, what's going on here? Well, we know the Chinese are backing off right now because we can see the economies around the world. They're just hanging on at this point. But don't let this fool you. Remember after the war in World War II, what was the only country that pretty much had manufacturing and was capable of manufacturing? It was the United States. What country right now has the capability of manufacturing if things go south and we need to restart the system? China. China has been accumulating a lot of gold. The United States probably has no gold. Most of the reports are showing us that there is no gold. So we are seeing that pending home sales are dropping. They gave us these fake numbers that new construction is surging, and of course they'll revise them, seasonally adjusted, manipulated, and they'll say, oh, yeah, those contracts, they disappeared, and we'll bring the number right back down. This is what they do every single time, but no one looks backwards, except us. But we can see the housing bubble right now, actually the echo bubble, and this is coming from Charles Hugh Smith. He points out that this echo housing bubble is finally starting to roll over. And the bubbles pop won't be pretty. Now, why is it starting to happen right now? Well, all the factors that inflated the echo housing bubble, they're running dry at this point. Unprecedented low mortgage rates. This is what we've been seeing. FHA mortgage approvals for anyone who fogs a mirror. You have a heartbeat. Guess what? You're getting a mortgage. Frantic crash buying by Chinese millionaires desperate to get their money out of China. That is slowing down. The Federal Reserve buying up trillions of dollars in mortgages. Not happening anymore. Lemming-like buying of housing for rentals by everyone from mom and pop to huge hedge funds. Starting to dry up. What we're seeing in the market right now is that these houses are staying on the market longer and longer. Now, is this happening in every single area? No. It starts in small pockets, then it spreads, and actually I'm seeing it spread to many more areas. These houses are staying on the market. People think in their minds that the housing market is still doing well because the corporate media, the government, they're telling them that the housing market is crazy. Sell your house, buy a house. And they put their house on the market, and it sits there, and it sits there because they have it too high. Then they start lowering it. Then they start lowering it, and they're starting to chase the market. And before you know it, the house is on the market for 90, 120 days. People start to get nervous. They lower it some more. But at that time, the prices are really coming down. And we're seeing right now that everything is starting to fall apart. Those young people coming out of college who are supposed to, get a good job, save their money, buy a house, not happening. They can barely pay their student loans. The government proved that this is the case because they have to modify your student loans based on your income right now. So if you have a part-time job and you can barely make ends meet and you have to live with your parents, you might only be paying $20 for that student loan. But you're not making any money, you're not going to be saving, and you will not be moving out anytime soon. This is what we're seeing right now because they realize all of these kids, they can't find jobs. I know many people graduating from college. Yeah, they have a part-time job. Many don't even have a job. And they're still living with their parents. Today, things have changed drastically. And you have to remember, the youth, this is the foundation for the next generation. And this next generation is not going to be there. And this is a huge, huge problem. Now, the Fed propped up the echo bubble by buying an insane $1.75 trillion in mortgages, almost 20% of the entire mortgage market in the U.S. The Fed has kept buying mortgages to maintain this level, but the Fed is no longer expanding the mortgage holdings. That well has run dry. And here's the knife in the heart of the echo housing bubble. Household income stagnating for decades for 90% of households has declined since the bubble top when adjusted for inflation. Please explain to me how declining real income can support nosebleed home prices now that mortgage rates have bottomed and started their rise. I mean, think about this. If the mortgage rates increase, those people that have adjustable rate mortgages, they're going to be knocked out. They won't be able to make their payments. Wait, we saw this back in 2008, didn't we? In California, when people just left their homes because they couldn't make their payments when rates started to rise. Well, we're starting to see the same thing right now. It's going to kick people out of the market who want to go purchase a home because as the rates rise, you need more and more money, and the income that you're making can't afford the house that you wanted. And a lot of people say, forget it. I'm not doing it. Now you can see why the interest rates are staying very low. Now, the Fed right now is continually telling us that the economy is fine, it's solid, it has legs, but something in the economy just doesn't add up. If we go back to 2009, we see, unemployment was at 10%, and then it continually dropped each year. I mean, they manipulated the numbers. They did whatever they possibly could to keep this number from going back up. And if they had to say, these people dropped out because they really don't want work, they want to support the family, they don't want to go on vacation, they don't want to have a house, they don't want to rent an apartment, they don't want to have an automobile, they don't want to have health insurance, they don't want any of that, so they just decided not to look anymore, which is absolutely ridiculous. But as we went forward, they keep telling us the unemployment rate continually is dropping. So when you hear this, you say, then the economy must be growing. But the economy is not growing whatsoever. I mean, many economists are sitting here scratching their head going, something doesn't make sense. I mean, they said this back in 2009. Many economists in the past few weeks have again reduced their estimates of growth. The economy, by many estimates, is on track to grow at an annual rate of less than 2% in the first 3 months of 2012, going from 2009 to 2012. Fast forward today, September 2015, the same question keeps popping back up. In fact, since 2013, the economic slowdown has only grown more acute, manifesting itself in last week's failure by the Fed to hike rates. A direct confirmation that nothing with the U.S. economy is as strong as the 5.1% unemployment rate suggests. So, back in 2009 going to 2012, they're saying as the unemployment rate comes down, the economy is going to be growing. Fast forward to today, 2013 to 2015, they're still saying the same exact thing. So something's way off here. Either the unemployment data is very much wrong and the real unemployment rate is much, much higher, or maybe the GDP calculation is incorrect and the economy is growing at a 4% plus rate. We almost hit it at 3.9 when they revised it, and we know that's completely fake. But we know the GDP, the economy, is not growing anywhere near 4%. So one must take all this data and say, well, it looks like they're completely manipulating the numbers. They're falsifying the unemployment numbers. They're falsifying the GDP numbers. They're falsifying the inflation numbers. And there's a scarier implication, is that in addition to all other seasonal adjusted economic data points which have become painfully unreliable, daily Treasury tax receipts must also now be added to the docket of meaningless and corrupt data points. The question of just how the Treasury could explain a massive deficit cash discrepancy could only be answered if somehow the Fed is found to be parking cash directly into the Treasury's secret basement. So, how can this be? Because if they're telling us that unemployment is down to 5.1%, and we know for a fact that all these jobs that are being added are pretty much low-paying part-time jobs, how do they have the revenue coming into the government? Think about this for a second. Why is housing not improving? And when I say that, I mean the people of the United States. Why aren't they taking out mortgages? Why is the mortgage applications continually falling? Because this should be booming right now. We're not seeing it. If we're down at 5.1%, retail should be expanding. We should see more and more stores opening. We should be seeing everyone saying, wow, this holiday season is going to be incredible. Forget last year's. This is going to be amazing. We're not seeing it. Actually, we're getting the economic indicators right now that this holiday season is going to be absolutely terrible. So all of this, when you put it all together, it is completely fake, phony. That's it. I mean, Christine Lagarde from the IMF, she's saying that we're going to have to cut global outlook once again. We started at 3.8%. We loaded 3.6%. It's 3.3%. Now it's 3%. Well, I'm going to say it's going to be much lower than that because this is absolutely ridiculous at this point. Because this is what they do. They'd say, oh, next year we're going to be around 8%. And then all they do during the year is lower it, lower it, lower it, lower it, lower it. And then they keep their manipulated 2.5% GDP growth, where most of the countries are zero or negative. And this is what we're seeing right now. We're seeing everyone revise their numbers, except for the United States, where we saw them kind of bring in consumer spending into the second quarter GDP to push it up to 3.9 to make everyone believe that we're doing much, much better than we really are. Of course, they bring in Obamacare, inventory, anything they can throw into this GDP number. This is what they're doing at this point. But eventually, all of this is not going to make sense whatsoever. We see China might be bringing in gold from London covertly. About 1,747 tons of gold. So at this point, we see that China is trying to get as much gold as they possibly can. And as China brings this in, I don't really think they care where it comes from as long as they can get their hands on it and they can hold it. And what we're seeing is that a lot of gold that's moving into China is not going through the exchanges. If the gold is for the government, they don't have to declare where it's going. They don't have to declare where it's going in or where it's heading. If you look at the way China does things, they're not going to tell you. So at this point, when we look at the holdings of London, because if we go back to 2011, not more than 997 tons of non-monetary gold has left the UK, according to official trade statistics. Nick Laird noticed that although the total amount of physical gold in London fell roughly around 2,744 tons over 4 years, only 997 tons were net exported as non-monetary gold. This makes everyone wonder where the residual 1,747 tons went. And most likely, it went from UK into China. And we can see at this point that Russia, China, India, and other nations are trying to amass as much gold as they possibly can. Because again, when the system comes down, the nations that have the gold, the nations that have the manufacturing, they will be the winners. If you look back in World War II, the United States went out and asked the people of the United States to hand in their gold. The United States had the manufacturing. Europe was decimated. More gold was sent over here, and the system was restarted. China and Russia, they understand this. And this is why they're continually accumulating gold at this point. Now, we all understand that gold is completely manipulated, and it looks like UBS is about to blow the cover on a massive gold rigging scandal. The Swiss Right Now competition watchdog just became the latest to join the ongoing gold manipulation probe when it launched an investigation into a possible collusion in the precious metal market. They're looking into banks like UBS, Julius Baer, Deutsche Bank, HSBC, Barclays, Morgan Stanley, and many others to see if they've been manipulating gold, silver, platinum, palladium. Will anything come of this? Most likely not. But they're looking into it, and if they do find something, what are they going to do? Find the banks? I mean, think about it. What happened with the LIBOR scandal? Nothing. Nothing really happened. Because no one is going to take action against the central bank or the banks. They'll just fine them. Big deal. Of course, they made trillions of dollars, and they'll fine them, what, $1 million, $1 billion? It's meaningless at this point. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared.